Hello and welcome to the CNBC-TV18 special in association with EY as we talk about the road to a $26 trillion economy. That is the headline that comes in from the EY report, India at 100. The expectation is that India has the potential and the ability to get to that number by 2047. To talk more about the growth enablers and what more needs to be done to be able to achieve that potential, joining me now on the panel this evening, Carmine Di Sibio, the Global CEO and Chairman of EY, also with us Saurabh Agarwal of the Tata Sons, and of course Rajiv Vimani of EY India. We'll shortly be joined by Ashwini Vaishnaw, the Telecom, IT and Railway Minister, and Sumant Sinha of Renewable Power. Carmine, many thanks for joining us. Let me start by talking to you about that. As I've been mentioning through the course of the day, there isn't consensus on whether we're heading into a recession, whether it's a mild one or a long protracted one, but there is consensus that if there is one bright spot in the world today, that is India. And that's where I want you to start with.
Well, first of all, Shireen, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. It's great to be in Davos. And I will tell you that we at EY, we are incredibly bullish on India and have been bullish. We have almost 90,000 people in India. When you talk about growth drivers, one of the biggest growth drivers is talent. And heading towards a $26 trillion economy, but with the talent that really is best talent globally. And I think that is a huge advantage for India going forward. And when I say talent, skilled talent. Talent that's very skilled in technology, very skilled in a lot of the areas that are needed today. So we're very, very excited about India. We continue to build resources there. We continue to build technologies there. Obviously, we serve the local market, but we also serve the global market out of India. And for us, it's a huge part of our business.
Yes, I know it's a huge part of your business, and I'd like to welcome Minister Vaishnaw here on the panel. Thank you very much, and this is probably going to be music to your ears. We are breaking the EY report, India at 100, here on CNBC-TV18, live in Davos, and the big headline number that EY is putting out and projecting is that India has the potential to become a $26 trillion economy by 2047. Minister Vaishnaw, I wanted to get your opening comments on that.
So, thank you, EY, for doing this report. Very encouraging. The numbers that you are projecting look very realistic. We might actually clock better than that. We have, under Prime Minister's leadership, taken a very consistent path towards growth. And it's a path which is investment-driven, so it provides you long-term productivity gains. We have also coordinated monetary policy very well with the fiscal policy. And our focus on bringing the poorest of the poor into the middle classes, that further improves the prospects for the country. And of course, the digital story is for all of us. We all know about it very well. India's stack is doing very well. India telecom stack will be the talk of the town in the year 2023, when we start rolling out Indian fully developed, fully made in India telecom technology stack. Within a couple of years, maybe 3 years max, out to out, India will be a big exporter of railway and telecom technology equipment, large complex machines, large complex systems. So good to be, and I request all the partners and all the stakeholders within EY ecosystem to take this opportunity seriously. This is a consistent 6 to 8% growth rate definitely for the next 10 years. So come over and make your presence felt. Be a part of this journey. Thank you.
Well, they are already part of the journey, but Minister Vaishnaw, I want to address one of the issues that the report also highlights, and that is the aspiration of India becoming the factory of the world. You gave an example of how you believe that on the railway side, we could actually start to export out of India and service the world. What needs to be done to ensure that we maximize this potential? We actually realize this potential of taking the share of manufacturing to GDP from the current 15% to 21% by 2030.
So multiple things. First, of course, the policy clarity, stability of policy, and which is what Prime Minister Modi ji has consistently given us always a better policy compared to what we already had. Second, of course, removal of so many archaic laws and removal of the compliances. Close to 20,000 compliances have been removed from the statute book. 1,500 laws have been repealed. Third is using the domestic demand as a big driver for attracting the supply chain. So let's take the case of railways, one of the largest networks we all know. Can we create a manufacturing model here which caters to the domestic demand and then becomes the global export hub? So for example, wheels, forged wheels, which are used in the high-speed locomotives and trains. Typically, these forged wheels used to come from Europe. Now, we have now taken out a tender which is 80,000 wheels will be procured by railways, and balance whatever you want to produce, you can sell and produce and export. Now, 80,000 wheels a year is a very large volume for any player to set up the factory in India, and that is what is happening. Same is the case for rails, same is the case for bogies, which is the very critical component of any train. Same is the case for the motors, same is the case for transformers which go into railway. It's practically every component. You won't find the kind of volume which India can provide, and use that as the base, and then so supply to the domestic market and then export to the world. It's a model which is working very well. The industry participants are really, really excited about it, and excitement should never be in words alone. It should be in terms of actual dollars being invested or euros being invested when we are in Davos. So, so that is happening, or the Swiss francs being invested. So.
But you know,
That's happening.
speaking of excitement and opportunity, I want to understand from you where things currently stand as far as the semiconductor plans are concerned, because that's a story that you're pitching to investors as well.
So that's going very well. Look at the speed at which the government has worked. Honorable Prime Minister approved the program 15 December of 21. 1st Jan of 22, we published the entire policy, and we started interacting with all the stakeholders. And within very few months, the stakeholders, the kind of confidence they got, because we were asking very simple question. We know that, yes, this is a new industry for the country. Tell us 1, 2, 3, what would you like us to do? So we took the homework from the industry participants, and each time, this happened 2, 3 times, 4 times, each time we went back with a report card, and the participants were really, really impressed with the way the government of India responded to them. It was not that, okay, come invest, no. Our question was, what would you like us to do to make sure that you consider India as an investment destination? And we answered those questions. We did what was supposed to be done. So that's where we are. Very soon you should see some announcements, and thank you very much to EY. I'm really sorry because of the time constraints. We have a meeting with Chairman Schwab and need to go there. That's hard time stop. This was
that's Davos. That's Davos. It's an assembly line. It's an assembly line. What can we say? But thank you very much.
Thank you so much
for stopping in, and we appreciate you launching the book. And we quickly have the book being given to you as well. And let me bring it. Yeah.
It was a promise made.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate you joining us. Yes, absolutely. That number on the cover of the book is what we're hoping we will achieve. Let's get started with that. And Saurabh Agarwal, you know, Chandra's written the foreword to this report as well, and he truly believes that 26 trillion is an achievable number. It's a real number. It's a credible number. But what do you believe are the possible deterrents, the possible impediments that we need to get out of the way to fully realize this potential?
Look, over the last 5 or 7 years, what I've seen is we have laid out multiple platforms to set up this growth for the next 15 or 20 years. And I've been in the industry for the last 25 years. I've never felt more positive than I feel today on the momentum that we are building up. I think what we have done in services, in IT services and services in general, $180 billion today, providing 5 million jobs, and several ancillary jobs that have got created as a result of that, and the industrial GDP growth resulting from many other sectors. I see that happening in manufacturing as well. And Minister talked about it. I think the government has been extremely proactive rather than just calling people to set up shop. They've analyzed each and every industry, gone into details of what are the deterrents and what do we need to do to actually attract the industry. So PLI, production-linked incentives, for example, I think across 13, 14 sectors, amounting to $30 billion are an example of that. And they are going in a very systematic way to at least address the problem areas and provide incentives to make sure the Indian manufacturing industry can be competitive by the time it achieves scale. So we are on the good part to that, and we are coupled with not just the export requirement, our own domestic industry. So Atmanirbhar Bharat, where we need to have our own manufacturing, is coupled with that. In terms of the bottlenecks, I think I personally see the human capital is where we need to put in all our energies. So whether it's education, healthcare, sustainability, I think if we can address some of those issues, we'll be well on path to achieve this. And these numbers are very much for real. I mean, the power of compounding between 6 to 8%, which is what we have seen for the last 20 years. If we achieve anywhere between that, 20 to 30 trillion is the number that comes out. So I will absolutely agree with the minister that it's for us to lose, and we can easily exceed this number.
Well, let's hope that we manage to get to that number. And if we do exceed it, well, that's a bonus. But Sumant Sinha, let's talk about one of the opportunities as well as the challenges. And the report, of course, talks about that as well. The energy transition and what you see as being the road forward. Many things have already happened. Many more are in the pipeline at this point in time. But what do you see that as being a big growth enabler? In what terms, what could it add in terms of Delta?
Yeah, thank you, Sheen. Yeah, so look, I think that, first of all, I agree with Saurabh on all the points that he made and also with the minister earlier. I think that India is actually poised for, I think, multi-decadal growth of 6 to 8%. And then you can do the math and, project it 5 years out, 7 years out, and you'll get to some fairly big number in terms of trillions of dollars. And the reason for that, in addition to the fact that the government is being so supportive in a number of sectors, is the fact that over the last 7-8 years, the Indian banking system has improved the asset quality substantially. A lot of the NPAs have been worked through, and therefore there's a lot of liquidity sitting in the banking system right now. So that is something that is willing to get or looking to get deployed. The second thing is, I think corporates also over this period of time have delevered their balance sheets, and so therefore are in a fairly healthy position, and that's why you're seeing all of this talk about start of a virtuous capex cycle that is likely to happen. Now, as far as energy is concerned, I think that the energy sector is really reflecting that. We are seeing demand growth at 6 to 7% a year. That is happening right now, and therefore, when you sort of fast forward that into the future and compound it, we're looking at adding over the next 30 years energy demand in India, which is equal to the entire size of the European Union today. Right? And you can see the size and scale of the market here, the number of companies that exist. All of that has to be created in India right now. And therefore, and ultimately power or electricity is something, or energy is something that is needed by all companies as a base input. And so therefore, I think that this is a sector that is going to grow dramatically. Within that, of course, as you know, there is this transition going on towards the whole clean energy sector. And it's not just confined to the electricity sector, because via green hydrogen, a lot of other sectors will also get addressed, the hard-to-abate sectors like steel and cement and shipping, aviation, and so on. And India is actually right at the cutting edge of this whole revolution that is happening right now by virtue of the leadership that the Prime Minister has provided in directing India towards treating this as an opportunity, the whole energy transition and the whole climate change area, rather than as a bottleneck for the country. And now I think, the world is looking to diversify away from China as a supply chain source. And India really has this unique opportunity of becoming that. And that's how the PLI scheme, for example, in battery manufacturing, solar manufacturing, electrolyzers, etc., in our sector, are going to be game-changing, because it is focusing people on setting up manufacturing capacities. And as you know, India historically has not been that good on manufacturing. But I think here is an opportunity for us, with the size and scale of the domestic market that we have, to really, really ramp up our manufacturing capabilities and become an export house as well.
Rajiv Memani, since you worked on the report, the question now is what more needs to be done in terms of putting the blocks in place to be able to achieve that number?
No, I think it's now a matter of execution. And I would say that, yes, the 26 trillion headline number is very good. But the real thing is the per capita income of $15,000. So you have population of 1.4 going up to 1.7 billion in 25 years' time, transitioning from $2,500 per capita income to $15,000 of per capita income. I think if we can achieve that, that's the real opportunity that we are seeing in terms of consumption and everything else. And the base factors, I would say, is the demographics today. So 25% of the people, global workforce, 25% of that will be coming from India. And that's a big number. And if we can focus, as Saurabh mentioned, on the skilling and everything, then this is a great opportunity. Also, it will be the youngest demographic base, one of the youngest demographics base amongst the G20 countries. So your average age is about 28 years, 29 years. You have the largest amount of working age population that is here. So that creates for the digital world, for office of the future, that creates a massive inelastic supply chain pool, if you can skill that. Because that, if you can create jobs for so many people apart from manufacturing, infrastructure and other thing, that's great. The second thing is the digital goods that have been, the digital infrastructure that's been built, that's a force multiplier. And I think it's very critical that if India has to have inclusive growth, because the only way this will sustain if the income levels go down, they go down the pyramid. So that means that everyone is moving up the chain.
Yeah.
And for that, what has been done with the Aadhaar, with the UPI stack, I mean, and the way. If you look at India's private credit to GDP ratio, it's amongst the lowest in the world. It's 60%, 55, 60%. So most parts of the world, you have that at 150%. So once you have the digital stack and you can provide financing, you can provide education, you can provide knowledge, you can provide services to the masses of people, then their ability to participate in the growth story really becomes phenomenal. So I think all these building blocks have been placed. If I have to see enablers of growth, I would say the most important thing is India continues with the macroeconomic stability that we have been pursuing. If we can find a way that we can increase savings rate, reduce revenue deficit so that you have more available to be invested in the capex cycle. So rather than spending money on subsidies, if we can balance more of that through capex, therefore you create more jobs in that process. And I think the government is doing, you can see, I mean, they've spent 3% of GDP last year in capex. And hopefully over, post-COVID, the revenue deficit will also start coming down. And if savings rates start moving up, the base in which we have built this model, Shireen, is really using savings rate as one of the pillars for that. Because India's investment cycle has been triggered through savings largely, rather than capital flows. So I would think if we can get the macroeconomic discipline, that's great. The second thing is we have done a good job of ease of doing business, but the more we push on ease of doing business, the better it is. So whether it is how do you, enforcement of contracts, dispute resolution, on the tax side, if we can do more in terms of the alternate dispute resolutions. I think those are some of the, I can go on, but...
Yes, I know you can go on. It's very clear that you can go on. He's quite literally like written every page of that report, hasn't he? But Carmine, I want to understand from you, from your vantage point, as you look at the way that the world is reshaping today, relationships are changing, geopolitics dictating how geoeconomics works. In that context, how do you find India placed today?
Yeah, so I think India is placed incredibly well. Look, there's no doubt that demographics are a huge advantage here, and the skill set's an advantage. I do think going forward, one of the areas that I think is something to not be concerned about, but to look at critically, is the energy transition that Sumant mentioned, because I do think that will become more and more important. Capital flows going into India will be more and more restricted in terms of if the energy transition is not happening, because the rest of the world's going to move a bit faster. And so when you have investors in the rest of the world looking at India, if India's not moving fast on that, there's going to be some reluctance. And that's going to be both from Europe and in particular from Europe, but also probably from the U.S. Or North America. So that would be something to focus on going forward, number one. Number two, in terms of just some of the areas, government making it easier for capital inflows is incredibly important. The minister mentioned some laws that have been repealed. The more of that happens, the better. Now, look, India's in a great situation right now demographically, globally, because obviously China, not only are there geopolitical tensions with China in the West, but also demographically, China's going to be in a disadvantage going forward, and we all know that. So it is positioned incredibly well for the long term. I think in the short term, I do think it's positioned well as well. I think some people politically have questions on, India's view on Russia-Ukraine, and in particular on Russia and the relationship there. But I think that's okay right now. That's okay. If there were to be more around that, it could hurt India in the short term. But I think right now it's fine.
Yeah, I don't think that is as much of a concern today, especially given where China finds itself. I don't think people want to take on too many battles at the same time. But Saurabh Agrawal, speaking of financing, and of course we were talking about flows coming into India, and in the context of the energy transition, the concern that Carmine raised, unlocking domestic pools of capital as well, and that's also going to be crucial as we try and move up the economic ladder. What do you believe needs to be done to be able to do that, and more involvement of the private sector across different aspects? How do you see that shaping up?
No, absolutely, Shireen. I mean, I must share with you, frankly, on capital, there's enough money available in the world, in India as well, to take care of what we need. To just give you an example, I mean, last 1 year, we saw almost $80 billion of FDI coming into India as part of VC funding as well as private equity. That's a large amount by any standard. And the formalization of the Indian economy is leading our savings into the right channels. And that is happening at increased pace, whether it's our pension funds, our insurance money, mutual funds. I mean, all of them are growing by leaps and bounds. The growth in mutual fund industry in Tier 3, Tier 4 is far, far higher than what it used to be in Tier 1, Tier 2. And that clearly is channelizing the funds into where they're required into the investment phase. So I would not be worried about that at all. In terms of overall environment, I think what we need to do is to keep working at ease of doing business. And what I mean by that is basically restricting or removing as many hurdles as we can and providing a stable environment. And what I mean by stable environment is basically we need to be very clear about our rules and regulations for a long-term perspective. We need to have stability and vision for next 15, 20 years for every sector, where we need to commit that this is the lay of the land and the level playing field is not going to change. And that is going to help and provide confidence to put investment into this country. I don't think money or capital is an issue at all.
No, money and capital may not be an issue, but, even in terms of policy predictability, I mean, the government did come out with a roadmap as far as corporate taxes are concerned. Of course, the sun is going to set now on that. There was an extension granted. Do you see that as being something that, would you think that they ought to reconsider that and maybe provide a 5-year window as far as the concessional rate of tax is concerned?
Frankly, we are quite competitive as far as taxes are concerned. I won't be too focused on that. What is more important for me is to see how do we start investing in R&D, innovations, and trying to take a lead on that. And the government policy and frameworks, including taxation, can help in aiding it. So what we need is a very focused strategy on building that innovations, creativity, R&D across sectors. And that is something where we are behind the rest of the world. And we were at the forefront of it till a few decades back. So certainly that's the point that what I'm trying to make is that's something which really needs focus from all of us, both the private sector as well as government. And I'm quite hopeful that we'll start moving in that direction.
Well, and I think everyone's hoping that we will certainly up the value aspect as well and capture much more of that. Back to the author.
I'm not the author. The team has done the work.
But, several growth enablers have been identified in the report. And I want to understand from you where you believe or feel most confident that we have, on each one of those, reached an inflection point.
No, I would say in almost all of them, I think we have had significant progress. So we have not gone out of the blue to say, so if I look at, Carmine talked about hydrogen, Suman talked about it. I mean, if you look at the private sector commitment to that, among some of the largest groups in India, almost committing $200, $300 billion to push that agenda. I think that in itself, whether we say it's reached an inflection point or not, I think that's in itself. I would say where we are already there and now it's a matter of, processing it further, it's on the India stack where I think now that has been laid out, and the office of the world. I mean, Carmine mentioned about EY, about lots of, other places. I think those two are now well settled, well done. Manufacturing, I think the government has laid out the path. I think there is a massive push to that. Infrastructure, again, I think there's been very good progress, but we need to just keep an eye on the infrastructure pipeline, NIP, and continue to push on monetization of assets and everything. So I would say most of the things that we have picked up on, Shireen, I think there has been a lot of progress that's already been made. Now it's a question of execution of the laws and execution on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And the execution roadmap is something that we must focus on, because that is where very often, we do seem to slip and we see gaps. But let me get wrap-up comments from each one of you. And Carmen, I'm going to start by asking you, what do you see as the single biggest opportunity as well as the single biggest risk?
The biggest opportunity is frankly the demographics, the economy, the consumers in India. Huge market and huge skills. So both of those huge opportunities. The risks we talked about. I mean, the risk. I do think there's a risk around the energy transition. I think there's a risk in terms of stability, making sure that government is stable, making sure that there's easier laws and rules to do business. That's always important. And frankly, I'm not worried so much on geopolitics because I think India is going to be in a good place there anyway. So I actually think the risks are actually very low. I think the opportunities are much higher.
Opportunities much higher. List down the opportunities that you're focusing on. What's on your dashboard outside of everything that you're already doing, Saurabh Agarwal?
Lot of it, Shireen. I think I must say today we see opportunities everywhere. And for us, capital allocation is a very, very complex task. And I find more opportunities than we can invest in that we actually are doing. So frankly, I think India is a land of opportunity, needless to say that. And I absolutely agree with Carmen. The biggest opportunity for us is the demographics. How do we use our people to leverage what we have? And with an aging world, I think we are in the center of the universe to provide what the world needs and what we ourselves need. And the biggest risk that we have is if we are not able to leverage our demographics properly. And we are a large population growing from 1.4 to 1.7. And if we are not able to manage that and manage, that's the biggest risk that I see.
Chandra gave a $90 billion number in terms of capex this morning. What could that number look like in 5 years?
That's for next 5 years. Hopefully, I think we will take it up from there when we reach there. But that number is very much from what I see across our businesses. It's not, sounds very large, but when we see the kind of businesses we are in, it basically ends up looking very small. To just give you an example, in Tata Steel, what we created in last 125 years, basically, the amount of capital we have put in last 5-7 years is equivalent of that. So it's only multiplying across every dimension.
So what could that number look like?
Let that 90 billion happen, and I'll wait for Chandra to give out the next number.
Okay. So Mansina, the biggest opportunity as well as the biggest risk.
I think that wherever we look, and just to echo the points of both Saurabh and Carmine, there is opportunity everywhere. For us, the biggest issue right now is what not to do. Because everything looks very interesting, everything looks very attractive, and the usual kid in a candy shop, you want to do everything, right? And that's clearly not possible. So you have to really make choices, and I think that's really where, in some ways, the jobs of CFOs is going to be important to provide that discipline to people like us who are very optimistic about what the future holds. But so then that's really the issue. But I think as far as risks are concerned, I think execution, I'll agree with Rajiv, is the issue because ultimately India is a big country. It's a complex country. And it's not just the central government. It's also the state governments. And not all state governments are on the same boat or are not necessarily as aligned, or they have their own agendas or their own paths and so on. And so therefore, very often, and a lot of execution happens on the ground at the state level. So we need the states to be equally aligned and to be equally sort of pushing forward. Otherwise, there could be problems. I think the other thing I would just point to is that there are the friction issues of doing business in India in some ways still have to be, they have improved tremendously over the last few years, but more can be done. And I'm not just talking about the governance aspect, I'm also talking about things like the judicial aspects and so on, because all of those things ultimately add to issues about doing business in the country.
Rajiv Bhimani, I'll give you the closing comment.
No, I think everyone has talked about the opportunity, so I'll not repeat it. But I think for me, as I started, the 6 times multiplier of per capita income in 25 years' time is a massive, massive thing. So, And the corresponding risk, and I think, and execution is definitely number one, is India needs to have a framework of inclusive growth. Because we are a large country, for political and social stability, inclusive growth is very important. So as long as we can have inclusive growth, I think the opportunities are enough. All the other things will fall in place. If the country benefits, if all the people benefit, things fall in place.
Absolutely. If there is growth and inclusive growth, a lot of the problems that we are talking about will be addressed. And of course, there are plenty of opportunities. As Suman Sinha said, that you need Saurabh Agarwal to tell you what to do and what not to do. And he's clearly doing that for the House of Tatas. But thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here today to take us through your insights on India at 100. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to being able to return back and see if we've managed to get to that number. So hopefully we'll get you all back then. Or revise that number. Harman, you wanted to say something.
No. I think that's great.
Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up the CNBC TV18 special here from Davos in association with EY. We are going to take a break and come back with more conversation from all of us here. Goodbye. Thanks for watching.